Video is to help with your InDesign double page spread assignment. Now, there's a little bit we need to do for setup for this assignment, and I'm going to go through that setup in InDesign, and then I'm going to go through how I would begin to put that page together. Now, if you look at the assignment, it asks for you to choose a short story, myth, or a fable with a minimum of 350 words, but not more than 800 words. And the reason that we have that minimum and maximum is because the idea behind this assignment is to have you flow text from one page to another. And if you don't have enough text, you're not going to be able to flow the text. If you have too much text, then you're not going to be able to fit all the text on the page. And so what I want you to do is when you find a standard myth or a fable, so I chose the tortoise and the hare. One of the classic versions of it is too short, and so there might be a longer version, a retelling of it. Or you might find one that's a little bit too long. You can go ahead and add some extra text as long as it makes sense in context of the assignment or the words for the story. So don't just add a paragraph that doesn't make sense in the middle of it. The reason that I have these different ideas is usually a short story or a myth or a fable specifically has very strong imagery. And with this strong imagery, it allows you to perhaps get ideas about how to design or to illustrate those images that are going to be a companion on this two-page spread. Now, you can use found images, but they need to be full color, and you need to find a way to make them your own. So if you do find a couple of images, look at how you can create a photo montage or combine multiple images into creating something new. Don't just find somebody else's illustration online and put it on the page and use that as your illustration. So work to incorporate original images. Now, with this, we're going to create a two-page layout that has a 3-column grid structure. And I'm going to show you how to set that up. Now, in InDesign, we're going to create a new InDesign document. And you may notice that your measurements are different. So I've changed my default measurements. If yours do not show inches here, go ahead and cancel this. With no documents open, go to InDesign, Preferences, Units and Increments, and change this from, it's probably points or picas, to inches on the horizontal and inches on the vertical spread. Now when you go back to New, it will show 8.5 by 11. Now what we want to do is, all the other InDesign documents we've been doing up to this point have been without facing pages. This one is with facing pages, so we do want this checked. And we want 1/2-inch margins, which are here. And then we want to have 3 columns. And with those 3 columns, we want 0.25-inch spacing. And then we want to have 3 pages here. And so if you back up, it's going to create 3 pages, which is our spread. And then I'm going to hit OK. Now with this, we don't want this top page here, and we want to just be able to work on this spread. And so what we're going to do, and it looks like I'm missing my windows here, so I'm going to fix my workspace, go back to Essentials, and that'll get me my tools and my palettes over here on the right hand side. So what we want to do is we want to go to our pages here, and we want to, in this upper right hand corner, select this, and we want to uncheck Allow Document Pages to Shuffle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to delete this first page. So I hit delete, and then it will let us have just our double page spread. If you forget to check that or uncheck that, it's going to not allow you to have 2 pages next to each other. So if it doesn't look like this, make sure you have this unchecked, and then you can delete that page. So now we've got our double page spread, and I'm going to save this because this is pretty much set up how we want to work with it. And what we want to do is we want to create a folder for you to keep all of your information in. This is where you should be keeping all of your files, especially your image files, so that InDesign can refer to those original image files. Now with this 2-page layout, we're going to create a layout using this 3-column grid structure. So if this is one page and we've got 2 pages, there's 3 columns per page. That's the 3-column grid structure. And then we're going to add text, and the body copy of the text should be no larger than 12 point. The default is 12 points. So if you find yourself making the body copy larger to fit the page, we're going to look at some different methods that you can use instead of making your type larger. The other thing you want to do is create an interesting or an engaging headline. So maybe it's not like a term paper where your type for your headline would be the exact same size as your body copy. We now think about how you could add visual hierarchy to it. What kind of color scheme are you going to use? Are you going to use an asymmetrical balance for the layout, symmetrical? Can you group things together? And so what you want to do is create a pleasing document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my text first, and I've got some text here in a text editor, and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to InDesign, and I've got to create a text area. And so I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to paste my text there. Now if you notice at the bottom here, it's got this little out port, and it's got a red plus sign. That means that there's more text here. So I want to click on that. And now I've got my text. Now if you notice, there is a lot of page here, and my text does not fit that page. Now if I look up here, it's 12 points, and you're not supposed to be any larger than that because 12 point is the larger end of body copy. So what we can do is we can start to think about how we could perhaps change the content here. So you can make your columns a little bit shorter. And perhaps we want to make there be a little bit of negative space. So I'm going to leave this column blank right here. And then I'm going to flow my text onto my next page. What you want to avoid doing is just creating a new text area and copying and pasting text in that area. These should always be linked, because if I do that, and I change the size of this or change the line spacing, it's not going to flow into that area. So we've always got to click on this and make sure it's linked, so that way when I make changes here, it will flow into that next area. So I'm going to make one more text area here. And one method that I'm using is I'm actually creating what's known as a hanging line for the main content. So it's an invisible line that goes across the top of the page for my content to flow from. And I'm going to find a place, maybe I'm going to do 3.5 here. And maybe I want to find a little bit different typeface. And what you can do is you start to look at different typefaces and decide what is still readable and legible. And so Minion Pro is probably an okay typeface, but I want you to experiment with something a little bit different. Now, if I was to choose something like this, it might feel a little bit juvenile and difficult to read. You would have to go larger with this size. And what we want to do is be a little bit more sophisticated. If I was to choose a typeface like Apple Chancery, it looks kind of flowy and fancy, but it becomes difficult to read because you see how letter forms start to crash into each other. You might be able to do something where you add some line spacing, and I just selected it and I'm holding Option and using the down arrow to add some line spacing. But if you look at it, it would still be really difficult to read a lot of text in that. So that's not an ideal typeface for text type. So I'm going to find something different here. Now, if I choose something big and bold like this, again, that becomes difficult and can be tiresome to read a lot of text that way. So we're going to go and we're going to look some more. Maybe I want to choose something like, let's see, what another example. So if we choose Arial Narrow, Now this one feels a little bit better, but it's very condensed, so it feels kind of squished or a little bit more difficult to read. And so this condensed nature does not make it ideal for text type. So we're going to go back. We're going to find this one. So if anything that's any sort of extreme can make it difficult to read. I've been kind of on an Adele kick. So this one right here has a good X height, so there's a lot of the counter space that we can read. It feels easy to read. It's still 12 point, and now I can probably even go a little bit smaller on this type. And then you can see it starting to flow through my document and fit the content of my document. Now, this isn't pulled all the way down, but perhaps we want to leave a little bit of space at the bottom as well. And now you can see that it's starting to fit that document. Another thing here is because I've got a ragged right edge and we've got hyphens, I'm going to remove the hyphens from my page. So I'm going to select everything, and up here on the upper left-hand corner, if I click on this paragraph tab, it will give me all the paragraph settings, and I can uncheck hyphenation. So I know that I have an image here that I'm going to use, and it's just one that I found and modified a little bit. And I'm going to open it, and I'm going to place it here on my document. Now, you can have text flow from this page into the next page. I'm going to place this here, and I'm going to send it to the back. And I don't want to stretch it any larger because it may not be big enough for me to make larger. It might not have enough resolution, so I'm actually going to go a little bit smaller here. And then I want to have the green go all the way up to the upper edge. And one method would be to take this shape and then do a color pick from that image, and then we've got a box that's that same size. Now, if you want to see it without all the lines, one way to quickly do that is, as long as you're not in a text tool or have the text type tool in a paragraph, you can hit W on the keyboard and it gives you a preview of that. So I think that this is working all right so far. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to create my headline. And my headline is, and let's see if I can spell, probably not tortoise. How do you spell tortoise? T-I-O-I-S and the hair. And I still didn't get it spelled right. Let's see. Let's see if I can find it here. I think I've got an extra I there. So now I've got this, and I want to find a similar typeface. So right now I'm using Adele here. I'm going to use Adele again. And there's some variations of it. So I've got Adele bold. And then what we want to do is we want to design this. And I don't even know if it, we got to look up the actual name of the, let's look it up here. What the actual name of it is. Okay, tortoise and the hare. All right. So I might want it to start to break things up. I'm going to hit W on the keyboard so I can see things on my pasteboard. Oh, so I want to make sure that my type tool here so it doesn't stretch it. So maybe I want to add a little bit of contrast here. Maybe we'll go we're going to break these up into different pieces. And typically when you have a double page spread, you don't want to have type go across this gutter because that's going to be in the center of the magazine or the book. and that can start to distort type. So you typically try and avoid putting faces or anything in this area. So I want to try and keep my headline over in this area. So maybe we want to make this a little bit larger, and I'm holding Shift and Command while I'm doing that. And I'm going to cut this out and create a new area. Probably want to make this the same as that, and instead of going to find it in the size, I can get my little eyedropper and I can suck that styling in here. So maybe I want to do that, and maybe we want to do the hair the same size as the tortoise. I've got to make sure it flips easily. It flips really easily to this color theme tool, so make sure you're on the eyedropper tool. And I've got to make sure I've got to have my type selected. There we go. So this might be kind of a start for my headline. And if you don't want to keep grabbing stuff like this, what you can do is you can go to your layers, and my layers aren't over here, so I can go to Window, Layers, and I could create a new layer here, and I'll drag that to the bottom, maybe if it's going to let me. So call this background, double clicked on it, background layer. And then anything that's selected will highlight right here, and I can click and drag, and it'll drag that to that background layer. Now I can lock it and I won't accidentally select that. I could, if I wanted, move this to this background layer, and I think I might as well. So I'm going to unlock it and move that to the background layer and lock it. And then I'm going to actually hide these bounding boxes. They're distracting to me, so that's all of these boxes that are around it. So if you go to Window, Extra, Hide Frame Edges, and then you can hit Command semicolon on the keyboard. That's how I like to work. With W, you don't see anything on the pasteboard, but I like to still work with things on the pasteboard. So now it doesn't distract me because those become a visual element that I don't really like to see when I'm working on something. So let's say that's kind of similar to what we might want. You know, I might want to pull some color from one of these images, and it didn't pull color because this is probably locked, and so we're going to highlight this, see if we can pull some color there. So I might want to pull some color from some of the images. Now, another thing that we've got going on here is we've got this text that's laid on top of this image. And what we want to do is we want to push that away. And we can use what's known as a text wrap to be able to push that away. And a text wrap can wrap around any object. And so I'm just going to create an organic object with my pen tool and click and drag around this area. And it doesn't really matter what the shape is, because really what we're doing is we're pushing away from this right-hand side. And then once that's selected, in your toolbar at the top, this one here is the one that will wrap around that shape. So if you see, it pushes that content away. And then I take this and I make sure that there's no stroke on it, and it pushes that content away. Now I can go back in here and I can refine this. So let's say I don't want it to have a jagged edge. I can go back in and refine my shape and my text wrap. Okay, so that works pretty good. I might want to push this maybe a little bit further away here. Another thing you could do is maybe I want to have a drop cap. So I can take this capital letter and maybe I make it larger. Something like that you can do there, and then you're going to want to change your spacing between, or your kerning. But maybe I want it to push down into the paragraph a little bit. So instead of here, what I can do is go to my characters, and there's what's known as a baseline shift, which is right here. And then I can kick it down a little bit so it balances in. And then maybe this, I choose kind of a script typeface. So that might be an appropriate place to use a chancery, or even though that's not a preferred one that I like. Let's see what I have here. Let's try, that one's probably too scripty. Let's see what else. I don't know that I have anything loaded here that I think would work. So maybe what I do is I just go back to my Adele and I choose a bold italic, so it's something like that. Maybe I want to change that color to, those are all probably too dark. And then I probably want to go back into my text wrap, which is hard to see here unless I go to View, Show Frame Edges, and then I can see it to grab it. And so maybe we don't want to push this far away on this very first letter. Looks like we might have some so then we're going to go back here. I actually like that cream color a little bit better. We're going to do that. Then I'm going to hide this again, so I'm going to go to Extras, Hide Frame Edges. Now, you might find that, and I'm going to make sure and save here, that dark is kind of hard to read on a dark background, and so you're going to have to play with what works for your layout. And I kind of feel like this maybe needs to get pulled down just a little bit more, and we want to make sure that these lines line up with each other across the layout. So I want the baseline here to line up with that baseline. Maybe we'll pull that there. Now we've got what's known as an orphan right here, which is a single word by itself on the end of a line. So I'm going to add a little bit of space, word spacing. And here I'm at 20, and 20 is too much, so I'm going to go back and maybe go negative. And I don't want to go more than -5. And that's not going to work. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go maybe up a size. And I got to make sure I get all my text selected here. It looks like I've got more text here, which is actually good because we want to fill some other space here. I'm going to select all my text and go, actually I'm going to go down to 9. And then we want to see where the flow of this text goes. It looks like we've got one there. Let's see if we can push it out. Okay, and then it looks like it's created what's known as a widow. And a widow is a single line that's separated from the paragraph it belongs with on its own column. So it could be a single line left here, and the rest of the text is over here, but right now it's a single line on this column. And so we want to avoid that as well. And so what you'll want to do is adjust your text so you don't get those. So perhaps I push this text onto that page. And maybe we don't want to go all the way here. And I think it might work well to have this entire layout, instead of having it white on this side, it could go green on the back. Or perhaps I put this cream color in the background. So we're going to make a text area. Let's see, instead of pulling it all the time, I think what I'm going to do is select this color. And click and let's see, let's add that to my swatches. So click on the upper right hand corner and it added it. So now I can, so it works a little bit different than Illustrator. And I want to make sure it's my background edge here. And that feels super bright. So maybe what I'm going to do is change the tint of it. And that's adding white. And it may be that we take this color and we go into this second page. So again, you can explore what that might look like. Perhaps all of these go up here and we figure out another illustration. Maybe it's some flowers or something like that that fits onto this side. But the main thing is to make sure that your text, and I want to make sure these text boxes align here to the top, flows from one paragraph into the next, and that you have some visual elements that lead you into your layout, and then it's easy to flow from one column to the next of text. Now this right here isn't lining up across this whole layout, so if I drag a guide here, you can kind of see. So I need to change these so they line up. Looks like I didn't get this one grabbed. And then make sure that your columns and your elements of text are all fitting within these columns that you've changed. Now, if you decide that you want to change your column structure, you can, but this is a good way to start. Now, what you don't want to do is to take your text and go all the way across the page, because those line lengths get really long. This becomes difficult to read. You could perhaps go across 2 columns, but you would never want to go across the entire page. And if you look at how much easier the pace of this is in 3 columns on an 8.5 by 11 page, that'll make more sense. So then once you've got your document set up, and I would probably add more detailing, maybe like a page number, maybe there's a caption, maybe you pull out a quote. And so I take this "who do you think you are" quote, and maybe I make a big quote and italicize it, center it. Maybe it becomes something like that instead. We push that text. So you can start to add other elements on your page. So this page is not done, but it's done enough to be able to demonstrate this. So then what you're going to do is you're going to export this. And the way that you export it, there is a setting that you need to make sure and do that allows me to preview it so that's in spreads. Because right now, if you remember, these are 2 separate pages. So if I go to File, Export, and the instructions are on Canvas as well, and then I export a PDF print document, and then what I want to do is press Quality, and then make sure that you check Spreads right here. And what that will do is, instead of stacking the 2 pages on top of each other in the PDF, that it will put them right next to each other. And then I usually have View PDF after exporting selected, and now when I export it, you'll see that these 2 pages are right next to each other. If after you export it and your pages are stacked, that's not correct. Go back and re-export it and select pages as spreads, and it should look something like that. Now the other thing that you're going to do is you're going to export, or you're going to package your file. And to package an InDesign file is if you go to File, Package. And what this is going to do is it's going to save all your fonts and your images into the same folder as your InDesign document. So I'm going to hit Package, and you can fill out these instructions if you want. I'm not going to. I'm going to find a place on my computer, which is my desktop, and it'll make a new folder, which it's going to copy everything in. Now in these settings here, uncheck the IDML and InDesign markup and uncheck PDF, because you are saving your PDF separately, and I want you to change your settings based on the export PDF. So uncheck those two and leave the top three of these checked, and then hit package. And this is going to be a warning that says don't share fonts, and then you say, okay, yeah, whatever. And then you can go to your desktop. Let's see if I can find my folder where there's my 2-page layout folder. And in here will be any fonts that you needed, and the fonts that I have are Typekit fonts, so they're not going to be here. But you're going to have your 2-page layout and your links, and that's the only image that I placed in my document. And then what you'll do is you'll zip this folder by right-clicking, compress, and you're going to upload this folder or this zipped file and your PDF, where let's see if I can find where my PDF saved. And I'm not seeing it here. So if I don't see it, when in doubt, I'm going to go back to InDesign and do it again. Oh, I put it inside my working folder. So I'm going to put it on my desktop here. Export, make sure it spreads. Now we've got it, and it should be on my desktop. So here it is on my desktop. So these two files are the files you're going to upload to Canvas. Hopefully this is a help to you, but think about what would a magazine layout look like. And if you feel like your type is too large or you're not sure about the size of your type, make sure it's no larger than 12 point. And also print it out if you get a chance to be able to see. In the bottom of your instructions here in Canvas, there is also an example of some contemporary magazine spreads on Designspiration. So if you click on this link, it should take you to a bunch of examples of what some 2-page layouts. Notice that there's a lot of negative space, which is totally acceptable. How columns are dealt with, if you notice some have wider margins. You don't have to fill every teeny bit of the space on your page. So hopefully that's helpful. Good luck, and can't wait to see what you make.